Texas jury finds Alex Jones must pay more than $4.1 million to Sandy Hook victims' parents for calling the massacre a giant hoax. This story is absolutely insane. First, they say this is far lower than the figure parents had asked them to award $150 million in damages, which their lawyer found a fitting penalty for Jones's decade of deceit. December will mark the 10th anniversary of the massacre. The jury, which reached the verdict on the first day of deliberations, has yet to award punitive damages and will return on Friday to consider that unresolved matter. Only the size of the award has been an issue at trial, as the judge issued a rare default judgment against Jones before trial for failing to comply with his discovery obligations. That's weird, right? You're a lawyer.
Yeah, it is. It's not something you see a lot in litigation. Typically, if there are disputes between parties on discovery, so for example, if a plaintiff or a defendant is seeking documents or answers to interrogatories or other questions in discovery, there's a process that you go through, right? The counsel for both parties confer with one another. They try to understand what the disputes are. And ultimately, the parties go to the court and ask the judge to weigh in on whether or not to order the party to produce those documents. And I'm not familiar with the specific details of Alex's case and the procedural history of how the default judgment happened, but it is a rare thing for a court to not provide any sort of intermediary sanction.
Right. They just went straight to default.
Less than default, which would be negative inferences, perhaps from an evidentiary standpoint, or other sanctions that the court might levy, but not going straight to a finding of liability.
Do you think Alex Jones can appeal this and potentially win?
Potentially, there's a ground for appeal, for sure. If, again, and not knowing what the Texas state court precedents are right now, but there, in theory, yes, would be a basis to appeal the finding of liability, which is the threshold finding for the damages that flowed out today in the $4 million or so verdict.
So this is the story from NPR. Conspiracy theorist Alex Jones ruled liable in Sandy Hook defamation case. This is from November 15th, 2021. They said a Monday ruling from a Connecticut court, which found Jones and other defendants liable for defamation, brought swift reaction from an attorney or as any of the families, yada, yada, yada. The Superior Court Judge Barbara Bella cited the defendant's willful non-compliance with the discovery process as the reasoning behind the ruling. Bellis noted that the defendants failed to turn over financial and analytics data that were requested multiple times by the Sandy Hook family plaintiffs. Now, this is a Connecticut court. The story about the $4 million is a Texas court. I know that he's got other defamation cases coming from these parents, but the reason I bring up that story, I believe it's the same one, but I'm not entirely sure. What I know is that, or what I can say, Alex told me they complied with everything, but no matter what they gave, they were told they weren't complying. I'm not saying you need to believe Alex Jones. Right. I'm just saying that's what he's asserting. Now, the question I have is, if a court orders you to hand something over that you don't have, and then issues a ruling in default, like, what do you do? Let's operate from the assumption that Alex Jones did comply with discovery as he claims, and they rule in default anyway. What do you do?
Oh, you go to the court and you explain all the things that you did to produce documents.
Oh, yeah.
You try to create, you show the court, for example, if you're searching for documents across a corporation, for example, what search terms you used, how you searched for documents, how you collected them and ultimately produced them. You offer the opportunity for somebody to come and do a forensic analysis to make sure you're not hiding something, right? Those are the steps that you could go through to sort of prove that you've complied with your obligations. But that doesn't sound like that opportunity was provided in this particular case.
Yeah.
Which again is going to potentially raise appealable issues.
So I wonder if this is just political. $4 million. I'm just going to come out and say it. For Alex Jones, He said in trial something like anything more than $2 million would like damage the company or something. I don't believe it. I think a $4 million ruling, Alex probably left, got in his car, and then went, yes. Because this, like a lot of people are posting on Twitter that this may as well have been a victory for Alex at $4 million because he makes so much money. Now, he doesn't make as much money as he used to, which is another big element of this trial, of this case, is that they're trying to claim people are just, it's so frustrating dealing with, people are saying in the trial, they said Alex Jones made $165 million in sales. Wow, Alex Jones made $165 million. No, that's gross. What's the net? What's the profit? What's the take home? What after taxes? Like how much money does men actually have? A lot. That's why I'm saying like, yeah, 4 million sucks. But for someone as well off as Alex, as big as his empire is, he can probably pay that.
How long do they take to pay that? Do they give him like a year every month? Does he have to make payments? Is it a bulk payment?
People don't know anything about this stuff. He's probably never going to pay him. Like there was a viral post. There was a post on Reddit, and then they were like, I think it was related to O.J. Simpson. They said it was a $30 million wrongful death lawsuit. He's only paid like $100,000 after like 30 years.
Why?
Because you can't squeeze blood out of a turnip.
Oh,
like what are you going to do?
Yeah, and people arrange their assets in ways that can be advantageous in that regard. I think the Enron executives, right, and when in the 2000s, who had multi-million dollar verdicts that were levied against them, who bought large houses in Florida, if I'm not mistaken, or if I'm remembering correctly, because essentially they could put their assets into a home that couldn't be levied against to collect against a judgment.
Yeah, they can't take your house from you, can they? Or
it depends on what state you're in terms of how far a judgment creditor can go to collect against you. Like I said, I think in the case of the Enron executives, there are special rules in Florida that allow people to put their assets into homes.
Weren't they like buying like $100 million house and then being like, sorry, I'm in bankrupt, you can't take my home from me?
I don't know. Remember if it was that much, but it was
big houses,
big houses and lots of money.
And then when they start like a bunch of like home renovations, they just start the renovations and they're like, sorry, all the money's out, even though it hasn't been built yet.
Yeah. I don't know.
It's easier than that. I mean, here's one thing you could do, right? Let's say you want to engage in corrupt behavior, or let's say you have plans to be corrupt, and you know that you can't take the money from an organization. Say, like, I don't know, you're an elected official, and you want people to pay you for favors, so you'll create something called like a global foundation. And then let's just say you're Secretary of State or something like that.
Under Obama.
Yeah. And then all of a sudden hundreds of millions of dollars are pouring into your foundation, which is unrelated to you.
Right.
That's one way. Or let's say you want to do large private equity deals with China, but you are an elected official. So you have your son fly on the government plane with you, just hypothetically, of course, and then share bank accounts with him. Even though I have no idea how that works legally, but share phone numbers. That way, if you were the one communicating, you can always just say it was your kid. And that way, you can try and cover it up. Those are things that somebody might do. Actually, just for the sake of clarity, I'm literally referencing what Joe Biden and Hillary Clinton have been accused of doing. In no way trying to encourage people to engage in any of those behaviors.
Right, the Clinton Foundation.
Right.
Took a lot of money.
And then when she lost, all of a sudden the Clinton Foundation stopped getting, like, money just dried up and just...
And then they disbanded it, and now it's back? Is that right?
Yeah, they were like, hey, we're going to win again or something like that.
When you said that one thing, Alex, or someone that feels like they've been wronged by the process can go to the court and see if they can rectify, like, discovery or whatever.
Right.
Is the court just basically the judge in this case?
It is the judge. Right. So if you have a discovery dispute, you try to work it out with the other party first. You do something called meet and confer with the other side to see if you can resolve the dispute without having to get the judge involved. But ultimately, if you're unsatisfied with what the other side is doing in terms of the documents that they've given or the answers that they've given in discovery, you go to the court and you move to compel and you ask the judge to order them to provide responsive documents or answers.
But what if you don't have it? Like, what are you supposed to do?
Well, there's nothing. Yeah,
nothing you can do.
There is nothing you can do other than again what I said earlier, which is show the court the efforts that you've undertaken to
And then
pull
the judge
back
can
the curtain.
The judge can just be like, you're lying.
Potentially, yeah.
Yeah, I think people need to realize everybody thinks you live in this world of laws and that the laws dictate what will happen. They don't. They're more like guidelines. I think it's funny when people say, because Carrie Lake is big in the news and they're talking about her election. There was a funny article that said if Carrie Lake gets her legally impossible wish, Donald Trump will be ineligible to run for president because you can only win twice or whatever. And I was like, legally impossible. I like how they say that, as if like the Declaration of Independence was legal as it pertained to the British Parliament. Like, no, a bunch of guys drank and then said, you know what, we're declaring independence. And the Crown was like, you can't, that's not legal. And they were like, we don't care. So at a certain point, humans just make decisions to do things. And so we might sit back and be like, you can't do that. The court says this. And it's like, bro, the judge is going to do whatever they want. And good luck. If you get a bad judge, what are you going to do about it?
Well, that's why you have an appeals process. Right?
I know, it's cool. But what if you get a bad Supreme Court?
Yeah, well, right.
Or they reject it. It's just...
No, that's true. I mean, we live in a fallen world and in a legal system that has limitations on its ability to do justice.
Yeah, that's true.
But I will say, just in defense of the legal system, in some ways, we are blessed and fortunate in the United States. Where we do, I believe in most cases, civil cases that I've been involved in, certainly judges that are trying to do their best to reach the right result. So we do have that blessing here in the United States that a lot of other countries don't have.
No, I mean, we got a pretty good system. I think the issue is just we're getting to this point culturally where you have two distinct Americas. You have the multicultural democracy. You have the constitutional republic. You now have judges. I understand. Sometimes you'll get a judge, and I've watched Law and Order, right?
Right.
They'll be like, this is good news. We've got Judge Smith, who's, not a fan of X or Y, which means we'll probably be able to get, these things filed or something like that. They'll say stuff like that.
Right.
And I've been involved in legal issues in the real world where I've been advised, if you file in this jurisdiction,
Right.
you're going to have this judge and he really hates this stuff. And so it's like, okay, you take those things into consideration. That's to a degree understandable, the perceptions of the judges and how they interpret the law. But we're getting to the point where these judges are like, I hate Alex Jones. He's an evil man. CNN told me so. I'm not going to let him win no matter what he does.
It is
we're getting to that point. I'm not saying this of the current judge. Some people are accusing it. I'm saying quite literally, like I'm saying as hypothetical, we're getting to the point where your judge is going to be like, I don't know or care who you are. You're MAGA.
And that's obviously not a place where we need to be. And that's a disturbing place.
Yep.
It's a scary place.
That's where we're at.
If anything, Alex Jones was the one who got defamed because after his Sandy Hook comments, they twisted that into saying that he also claimed Parkland didn't happen and all sorts of things didn't happen. None of that was true.
They brought up how like some of the stuff he was saying was him reading comments from users and news articles. And so it's like,
There should also be room for Alex Jones to be a performer because that's partly what he is.
I don't like the idea that look, the Sandy Hook families, these are private individuals. You don't get on a big platform and start accusing private individuals of stuff. You shouldn't do it for anybody, right?
I didn't watch that, what he said at the time.
Yeah, I mean, he had his own employees were telling him to stop.
What did he say exactly? Is it public?
Is it on YouTube? I don't think that you're allowed to
it's not.
repost what he said on YouTube.
It's not, and I would not be able to quote exactly what he said. But I know there were various instances of him accusing them of being crisis actors or saying they weren't real. But a lot of it was him being like, oh, look what this person said, and look what this person said. And then they also accused him of saying things like, if you really did lose your children, I'm so sorry. And they were like, what does that mean? And they were saying those statements as well were part of the defamation. What you got to understand about private individuals, you can't, like the standard is really low for defamation against a private individual. Or I shouldn't say it's really low, it's just really high if you're a public figure. So what they tried doing with the Covington Catholic kids was claiming they were involuntary public figures. Like, that's absurd. But Alex didn't get a jury trial in this as to whether he defamed them, so we didn't even go over that stuff. Jones was instructed that he was not allowed to say that he didn't do it. He was not allowed to defend himself at all. They said he wasn't allowed to say he complied with discovery, and he wasn't allowed to say he didn't defame them, and he wasn't allowed to say that he didn't mean to cause them intentional harm.
Why could
That's crazy.
Yeah, and on the first issue about not being able to say he wasn't liable, that was already decided. It was a trial. It was a trial on damages. So that's not out of the ordinary at all, right? Because if you're only there to try damages, the issue of liability is already.
It is out of the ordinary,
right?
It was rare that there's a default
Right,
ruling.
correct,
in this case.
correct, right.
So the
exactly.
fact that he never
But-
got an opportunity to
correct.
be like, here's what happened.
Correct.
That being said, I got to tell you guys, before the trial even happened, I know people have told me, it's hearsay, but they were like, I heard so-and-so said to Jones, you have to stop doing this. And then in the trial, they actually brought up communications where employees at InfoWars were telling him, like, why are you doing this? It's not worth it. You need to stop. And he didn't. And, people have brought up that he was drinking, probably got arrogant. I mean, this dude was making a lot of money. He was making here's the crazy thing. They said it was like 165 million in sales, $165 million in sales. I also heard Scuttlebutt was like, he was making like 10 million a month. So if you're doing 165 million per year, if you're making 10 million, imagine what his profit margins are. Some speculate it was around 70%. Makes sense.
It's a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. And I'll tell you this too, like the 4.1 million, I know it's bad. There's precedent, like they're trying to get a political victory or whatever it is people think. The thing about this 4.1 million is I'm willing to bet Jones got crypto or something. He knew this was coming. So you have to imagine that if you know it's coming and you're working a company, you're going to ramp up everyone's salaries. Your kids are going to get their inheritance very quickly. And then they're going to come for you and be like, it's all gone.
You're ordering your fare. You are ordering your affairs strategically.
Yep.
At that point, though, there are remedies potentially that these plaintiffs can take to try to trace that money to some extent. But
well, let me ask you then, as a lawyer, like if Alex Jones paid $1 million to an employee, could they then get that money back?
Well, the problem is what did the employee do with it right after they got it, right?
Let's say that someone was contracted to produce a documentary, and they're a documentary filmmaker, and Alex said, "We'll give you $1 million to produce this massive documentary," and they said, "You got it." It's a third party. Let's say it's a third party company that's contracted with Alex Jones. How would you get the money from them? I mean, they're not involved in your lawsuit. You can't just take the money from them. They're doing work, right?
Yeah, I mean, provided it's a legitimate arm's length transaction that's not fraudulent.
How would you? No, yeah, sure. It's like an invoice came in and it said, "Here's the proposed budget for the film,"
right?
And they said, "We're going to pay you the $1 million." What do you do?
And that gets into the interplay of potential bankruptcy questions, which I'm not a expert in bankruptcy. But fraudulent transfers and things of that nature where creditors will go and try to.
But I'm saying
collect.
not fraudulent. Like,
right.
let's say Alex Jones has never done $1 million documentary before.
Right.
Gets sued, and then he decides to do one. Now he's broke because he spent all the company's money. You sue him, and he says, "I don't have any money." They say, "Where is it?" We spent it. I'm running the company.
Right.
And then you show like a legitimate invoice and transaction and budgeting plan for this big project.
Right.
And then
is that what you think is happening with the upcoming documentary?
What, he's doing that?
That is not his,
has
actually.
A documentary.
Alex's war is not related to InfoWars.
I'm not.
He didn't contract that in any way.
No.
I'm not referring to anything
what I was
about Alex
told.
Jones. I'm saying, like, in the event that you get sued, couldn't you just spend the money?
Well,
and then whoever's hands it belongs to,
you can't sue them.
That's their private business.
Right. And then I couldn't take your money, if I was suing Ian and
right. No,
paid you for a sandwich.
and again, I think what would happen is you would have to apply the law and the case law in the jurisdiction where you're in his case in Texas, as they're going to go and try to collect against him personally. They're going to try to collect against these corporations. Then you're going to have a overlay with the bankruptcy court and how the bankruptcy process plays out, and who's going to get paid and in what priority, because I imagine he has other creditors, not just these judgment creditors that are out there that he owes money to. Right. So
yeah, I don't. It's a $4 million judgment, and I'd be surprised if they actually even get any money. I mean, they might get a little bit. But what's going to happen?
Right.
I mean, And,
right, because it sounds like they might have to get in line, right,
Exactly.
with a lot of other people.
Yep.
In the bankruptcy process.
And then there's questions of like, let's say Alex Jones just says, I declare bankruptcy, I liquidate the assets, I pay everybody off, and then he takes a lucrative contract working for a different company. And so, sure, out of the money they're paying him, maybe they only pay him a small, 6-figure salary. Yeah. So he only has to pay a certain percentage, but then he gets to live luxuriously, through other people. Like, he's Alex Jones. He could take a cell phone worth $20 and film a video and get 1 million views. Thanks for checking out this segment from the Timcast IRL podcast. But if you want to check out the full show live, tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m. And if you want more special access content, head over to timcast.com and become a member. Your membership helps sustain this company, keep our journalists employed, makes this show happen, and you will get access to exclusive members-only segments of the Timcast IRL podcast, and there's a massive library to check out. So again, go to timcast.com or tune in Monday through Friday at 8 p.m., and we'll see you all there.